I do. God Yule. Our brother Thor is thundering outside today, and we are going to be continuing Egil's saga. Hilderid's sons went to see the king and invited him to a feast lasting 3 nights. The king accepted the invitation and named the date, and when it came around, he arrived with his men. There were not many other people there, but the feast went very well and the king was in high spirits. Haddock started talking to him and brought the subject round to his travels that summer. The king answered his questions, describing how well he had been welcomed by people everywhere as their means allowed. The feast at Torgor must have been a class in its own, Haddock said, with more people there than anywhere else. The king said this was right. That was only to be expected, Haddock went on, because more was lavished on that feast than anywhere else too. But you were very fortunate that it turned out that you did not find your life in danger. Of course, someone as outstandingly wise and fortunate as you was likely to suspect a plot when you saw the great crowd that was gathered there. I'm told you either had all your men fully armed, or that you kept a safe watch both day and night. The king looked at him and said, "What are you suggesting, Haddock? What can you tell me about it?" "May I have your leave to talk as I please, king?" Haddock asked. "Speak on," said the king. "I cannot imagine that you would be pleased to hear everybody, when they are free to speak their minds at home, accusing you of imposing tyranny on them," Haddock said. "But to tell the truth, the only thing that prevents the common people from rising up against you is lack of courage and leadership. And it is not surprising that people like Thorolf regard themselves as superior. He has strength and elegance in plenty, and keeps followers about him like a king. He would be enormously wealthy anyway, even if he made do with what is his own without disposing of other people's belongings as if they were his own too. And he was set to repay you badly for the large revenues you have granted him. To tell the truth, when people here heard that you had gone north to Heligoland with no more than 300 men, they decided to gather forces and kill you, king, and all your men. Thorolf was the architect of that plan, because he had been offered the kingship of the provinces of Heligoland and Naumdal. He travelled back and forth through every fjord and visited all the islands, gathering all the men and weapons he could, and made no secret of his plan to send the army into battle against King Harold. But it is also true that even though you would have had a smaller force when your armies met, those farmers were terrified when they saw you sailing up. They decided on another plan, to welcome you and invite you to a feast. The plan then was that if you all got drunk and fell asleep, they would attack you with fire and arms. To prove it, you were all housed in a barn, if I've been told the truth, and that was because Thorolf did not want to burn down his own fine new house. As further proof, every room was full of weapons and armor. But when all their trickery failed to work on you, they opted for the best alternative, which was to hush up the whole scheme. I imagine they will all keep the plot hidden, because I don't think many of them can honestly claim their innocence if the truth gets out. My advice to you now, king, is to take Thorolf into your company, make him your standard bearer, and station him in the prow of your ship. That's a task he is eminently suited for. But if you want him to be a landholder, then you should grant him revenues from lands down south in Fjordan, where his family comes from, so that you will be able to see to it that he does not grow too powerful. Then you can entrust your agencies here in Heligoland to less extravagant people who will serve you loyally, people whose families come from here, and whose kinsmen have performed these tasks before. My brother and I are prepared and willing to do anything you wish to use us for. Our father was the king's tax collector here for a long time, and discharged his duties well. You need to take care in appointing people to manage your affairs here, king, since you visit here so rarely. This is not an important enough place for you to station an army here, but you should not visit with a small force because there are many untrustworthy people here." The king was furious at hearing these words, but spoke calmly as he always did when hearing important news. He asked whether Thorolf was at home on Torgor Island. Haddock said that was unlikely. "Thorolf is clever enough to know he should avoid meeting your forces, king, because he cannot expect everyone to guard the secret so closely that you would never find out about it. He went to a loss when he heard that you were moving north. The king scarcely mentioned the matter to other people, but it was obvious that he firmly believed what he had been told. When he proceeded on his way, Hilderid's sons sent him off respectfully with gifts, and he promised them his friendship. The brothers found a pretext for visiting Namdal and made detours so that they kept meeting the king, who was always friendly to them when they greeted him. There was a man called Thorgil's Boomer, whom Thorolf regarded most highly among all the members of his household. He had been on Viking raids with Thorolf as his standard-bearer and sat in the prow of his boat. At the Battle of Havsfjord, he fought on King Harald's side, steering the ship Thorolf had used on his Viking raids. He was a man of great might and courage, and after the battle the king presented him with gifts and promised him his friendship. Thorgils looked after Thorolf's farm at Torger in his absence and handled his affairs. Before Thorolf went away, he had handed over to Thorgils all the tribute he had collected for the king on his voyages in the mountain regions, and told him to give it to the king if he did not return before the king travelled down from the north. Thorgils fitted out a great and fine cargo vessel belonging to Thorolf, loaded the tribute into it, and took a crew of almost 20 men with him. He sailed south and met the king in Namdal. When Thorgils went to see the king, he passed on a greeting from Thorolf and told him this was the tribute he had sent him. The king noticed him there but said nothing, and it was obvious he was angry. Thorgils went away, intending to choose a more suitable time to talk to the king. He went to see Ulver Hump, who told him everything that had happened and asked if he had any explanation. "I don't know," Ulver said, "but I have noticed that the king falls silent every time Thorolf is mentioned, ever since we were at Leka together, which makes me suspect that people have been slandering him. I know Hilderid's sons talk at great lengths with the king in private, and it's obvious from the things they say that they are Thorolf's enemies. I will find out from the king himself." Ulver went to see the king and said, "Your friend Thorgils Boomer has arrived with a tribute due to you from Finnmark, much more than ever before, and much better quality goods as well. He is eager to carry out his task properly, so please go and take a look, because such fine skins have never been seen before." Without saying anything, the king went to where the ship was moored. Thorgils immediately took out the goods and showed them to the king. When the king saw it was true that the tribute was much greater and better than before, his brow lifted somewhat and Thorgils was able to talk to him. Thorgils gave the king several beaver skins that Thorolf had sent along, and other precious things he had acquired in the mountains. The king grew happier and asked what had happened on their voyage, and Thorgils gave him a thorough account of everything. Then the king said, "Such a shame that Thorolf seems to be disloyal and wants to kill me." Many people who were present answered this comment and were unanimous. They said that whatever the king had been told was slander put around by evil men, and Thorolf was innocent of such accusations. Eventually, the king said he was inclined to believe them. He was cheerful when he spoke with Thorgils after that, and they parted on good terms. When Thorgils met Thorolf, he told him everything that had happened between him and the king. That winter, Thorolf went to Finnmark again, taking almost 100 men with him. Once again, he traded with the Lapps and traveled widely through Finnmark. As he advanced farther east and word about his travels got around, the Gwen people came and told him that they had been sent to him by their king, Vadavid. They told Thorolf how the Karelians had been raiding their land and gave him a message from the king to come there and give him support. Thorolf was offered an equal share of the spoils of the king, and each of his men got the same as 3 Gwen. It was a law among the Gwen people that their king received a third of his men's plunder, but reserved all the beaver skins, sables, and martens for himself. Thorolf put the proposition to his men and gave them the option of going or not. Most of them chose to take the challenge because of the large amount of wealth at stake. so they decided to set off eastwards with the messengers. Finnmark is a vast territory, bordered by the sea to the west and the north, and all the way to the east with great fjords, while Norway lies to the south of it. It extends as far south along the mountains as Heligaland does down the coast. East of Nalmdal lies Japland, then Helsingland, Gvenland, Finland, and Karelia. Finnmark lies beyond all these countries, and there are mountain settlements in many parts, some in valleys and others by lakes. In Finnmark there are incredibly large lakes with great forests all around, while a high mountain range named Fjorden extends from one end of the territory to the other. When Thorolf reached Gvenland, he met King Faravid, and they prepared to set off with 300 Gven and 100 Norwegians. They took the highland route through Finnmark and reached the part of the mountain where the Karelians who had been raiding the Gven. When they realized an attack was pending, the Karelians joined ranks and advanced towards them, expecting another victory. But when the battle started, the Norwegians attacked fiercely, having stronger shields than the Gven. This time it was the turn of the Karelians to suffer casualties. Many were killed and others fled. King Faravid and Thorolf won a huge amount of booty and returned to Gvenland. Thorolf continued on to Finnmark with his men, parting with the king in great friendship. Thorolf descended the mountain at Vefsna and called at his farm on Sandnes, spending some time there before travelling south to Tortuga Island in the spring. When he arrived there, he was told that Hilderid's sons had spent the winter in Trondheim with King Harald and did not miss any opportunity to slander him to the king. Thorolf heard many accounts of the slanders they had put around against him. The king will not believe such lies, even if he is told them, because I have no reason to want to betray him, said Thorolf. He has treated me grandly in plenty of ways, and never badly. It is nonsense to claim that I would ever do him harm, even if I had the chance. I would rather be his landholder than have the title of king in the same country as another man who could make me his slave whenever he wanted. Hilderid's sons had spent the winter with King Harald, taking the men from their farm and their neighbours with them. There were 12 men there in all. The brothers spoke a lot to the king, always presenting Thorolf in the same light. Were you pleased with the tribute from the Lapps that Thorolf sent you? Hadak asked the king. Very pleased, replied the king. You would have been even more impressed if you had received everything due to you, Hadak said. But it turned out quite differently. Thorolf kept a much larger share for himself. He sent you a gift of 3 beaver skins, but I know for certain that he kept 30 for himself that were rightfully yours. And I think the same happened with other items. It's quite true that my brother and I would bring you much more wealth if you entrust a collection of the tribute to us. Their companions corroborated everything they said about Thorolf, and in the end the king was furious with him. In the summer, Thorolf went to Trondheim to see King Harald, taking all the tribute with him and much more wealth besides, along with a band of 90 men, all well equipped. When he reached the king, they were shown into the guest quarters and lavishly provided for. Later that day, Olver Hump went to talk with his kinsman Thorolf. Olver told Thorolf that heavy slanders had been put around against him, and that the king had listened to these accusations. Thorolf asked Olver to speak to the king on his behalf, because I will not be granted a very long audience with the king if he prefers to believe the slanders of evil men, again, instead of the truth and honesty which he will hear from me. The next day, Olver met Thorolf and told him he had discussed his affairs with the king. I am hardly the wiser now about what sort of mood he is in, he said. Then I will go see him myself, Thorolf said. He did so. He went to the king when he was at the dinner table, and greeted him when he entered. The king returned his greeting and ordered someone to fetch Thorolf something to drink. Thorolf told the king that he had brought him his tribute from Finnmark. And I have brought you even more things to honor you. I know whatever I do in gratitude towards you is always in my best interest. The king said that he expected nothing but good from Thorolf, because I deserve no less. but there are conflicting stories about how careful you are about pleasing me. If anyone says I have shown you disloyalty, then I have been wronged, said Thorolf. I think people who make such claims to you are less your friends than I am. It is obvious that they aim to be my greatest enemies, but they can also expect to pay dearly for it if we clash. Then Thorolf went away again, and the next day he handed over the tribute in the king's presence. When it had all been made over, Thorolf produced several beaver skins and sables, saying that he wanted to give them to the king. Many of the people there said this was a noble gesture, well deserving to be repaid with friendship. The king said that Thorolf had already taken his reward for himself. Thorolf answered that he had loyally done everything he could to please the king. There is nothing I can do about it if he is still not satisfied. The king knew the way I treated him when I was staying with him as one of his men, and it strikes me as strange if he considers me a different character now than the one I proved to be then. You dispatched yourself well when you were with me, Thorolf, said the king. I think the best course is for you to join my men. Serve as my standard bearer and defend yourself against the other men of mine, and no one will slander you if I can see for myself, day and night, the way you conduct yourself. Thorolf looked to either side, where his own men were standing. I am reluctant to relinquish this band of men, he said. You will decide my title and the privileges you grant me, king, but I will not hand over my band of men for as long as I can provide for them, even if I have to live by my own resources alone. I want you, I implore you, to visit me and hear the testimony given about me by people whom you trust, and then do what you feel is appropriate. The king replied that he would never again accept Thorolf's hospitality. Thorolf went away and prepared to travel home. When he had left, the king granted Hilderid's sons the agencies in Heligaland that Thorolf had previously held, and a collection of tribute from the Lapps. The king seized possession of the farm on Torga Island and all Brynwulf's former property, and entrusted it all to Hilderid's sons. The king sent messengers to Thorolf with his tokens to inform him about the arrangements he had made. Thorolf took the ships that he owned and filled them with all the possessions he could, took all his men, slaves, and freed slaves alike, and went north to his farm in Sadness, where he lived just as lavishly with just as large a household as before. Hilderid's sons took charge of the king's tax collection in Heligaland. For fear of the king's power, no one spoke out against the changeover, although many of Thorolf's kinsmen and friends disapproved strongly. In the winter, the brothers went up into the mountains, taking 30 men with them. The Lapps were far less impressed by these agents of the king's than they had been by Thorolf, and the tribute they were supposed to pay proved much more difficult to collect. The same winter, Thorolf went to the mountains with 100 men, and straight to Gvenland to meet King Faravid. They made their plans and decided to go up into the mountains as they had the previous winter with 400 men. And they came down in Karelia, where they attacked settlements that they felt they had sufficient numbers to handle. After raiding there and winning much booty, they returned to Finnmark as winter progressed. Thorolf went home to his farm in the spring, sending men to Vegan to fish cod and others to catch herring, and he stocked up with all manner of provisions. Thorolf owned a big ocean-going ship, which was lavishly equipped, richly painted above the plumb line and fitted with a black and red striped sail. All the riggings were well designed. Thorolf had the ship made ready to sail and sent his men to look after it, loading it with stockfish, hides, and ermine, and a great quantity of squirrel skins, and other furs from his expedition to the mountains, a very valuable cargo. He told Thorga's boomer to take the ship to England to buy cloth and other goods that he needed. They scourged the coast to the south, then put out to sea and landed in England, where they did plenty of trading. After that, they loaded the ship with wheat, honey, wine, and cloth, and set off for Norway again in the autumn. They had favourable winds and landed at Hordaland. The same autumn, Hilderid's sons went with a tribute to hand it over to the king. He watched as they did so. "Have you handed over all the tribute you took in Finnmark, then?" he asked. "That's right," they said. This tribute is both much less and much poorer than Thorolf used to collect, and you told me that he managed it badly. It's a good thing you've considered how much tribute usually comes from Finnmark, King, said Haddock, because then you have a clear idea how much you will lose if Thorolf ruins it for you entirely. There were 30 of us in Finnmark last winter, as has been the custom among tribute collectors. Then Thorolf arrived with 100 men. We heard he had said he was planning to kill my brother and me and all the men with us, on the grounds that you, the king, had granted to us the office he wanted for himself. We saw no option but to avoid a confrontation with him and leave, which is why we only went up into the mountains a short way from the settlements, while Thorolf travelled over the whole territory with his band of men. He took all the trade there, and the Finns paid him tribute, and he gave them a guarantee that your collectors wouldn't enter the territory. He intends to proclaim himself king of the northern territories, both Finnmark and Heligoland, and it is astonishing that you let him get away with everything he does. As outright proof of the riches Thorolf has taken away from mountain regions, the largest Nor in Heligoland was loaded at Sandnes this spring, and Thorolf was said to be the sole owner of all the cargo on board. I think it was more or less full of skins, and there were more beaver and sable skins than Thorolf let you have. Thorgil's boomer took the ship, and I would guess he sailed it to England. If you want to find out the truth, you should spy on Thorgil's movements when he comes back, because I can't imagine that so rich a cargo has ever been loaded on any trading ship in our day. I think, if the truth is told, every penny on board was yours. Haddock's companions corroborated that every word he had said was true, and there was no one there to speak out against him.